This story is inspired by real-life situations and includes fictional elements for entertainment. Not recommended for viewers under 18.
No one noticed the moment their marriage ended. Not the night Evelyn stopped waiting for Nathan to come to bed. Not the morning he forgot to kiss her goodbye. Not even the day she decided to replace him. The truth was quieter than that. It ended the moment she believed she was the only one keeping secrets. Chicago, late October. The city wore its cold like a warning, sharp winds slipping through narrow streets, brushing against glass towers that reflected a sky permanently stuck between grey and darker grey. Inside their apartment on the 23rd floor, everything was warm, curated, and still. Evelyn Harper stood in front of the kitchen island, scrolling through her phone, her reflection faintly visible in the darkened window behind her. Her Instagram feed looked like a life she recognized, but didn't feel anymore. Smiling photos, carefully filtered dinners, anniversaries that felt more like performances than memories. Behind her, Nathan Cole sat at the dining table, laptop open, eyes fixed on blueprints glowing faintly on the screen. "You're working late again?" Evelyn asked, not turning around. Nathan didn't look up. Deadline moved up. It always does. There was no accusation in her tone. That was the problem. Silence settled between them, thick but familiar. It wasn't the kind that demanded resolution. It was the kind both people learned to live inside. Evelyn set her phone down, exhaling slowly. "We had plans tonight." Nathan paused, fingers hovering above the keyboard, then continued typing. "We can reschedule." She almost laughed but didn't. "Yeah," she said quietly. "We always do." Nathan finally looked up, his expression unreadable. Not cold, not distant, just neutral. It used to comfort her, his steadiness. Now it felt like standing in front of a locked door. "You could at least pretend it matters," she said. "I do care. That's not the same thing." Nathan closed his laptop with a soft click. "What do you want me to say, Evelyn?" She turned then, leaning against the counter, arms crossed. Something real. The word lingered between them. Nathan studied her for a moment, as if searching for something specific in her face, something he couldn't quite find. "I don't think you'd believe me if I did," he said. That stung more than she expected. "Try me." Another pause, then, quietly, "I think we stopped listening to each other a long time ago." Evelyn blinked, caught off guard. That wasn't defensive. It wasn't dismissive. It was accurate, and she hated that. "That's convenient," she said, her voice sharpening. "Blame both of us so neither of us has to actually fix anything." Nathan didn't react. He simply watched her, calm in a way that felt almost deliberate. "I'm not blaming anyone," he said. "I'm just not pretending anymore." The words landed softly, but they echoed. Evelyn looked away first. "Dinner's getting cold," she muttered. They ate in silence after that. The kind of silence that wasn't empty, but full of things left unsaid. Later that night, Evelyn lay awake, staring at the ceiling while Nathan slept beside her, or at least pretended to. She could feel it now, clearer than ever, the distance. It wasn't sudden. It hadn't arrived with a fight or a betrayal or a dramatic moment. It had drawn slowly, quietly, like something neither of them thought to stop. She turned onto her side, watching the outline of Nathan's back. There was a time she could read him effortlessly, his moods, his thoughts, the subtle shifts in his breathing. Now he felt like a stranger she used to know. Her phone buzzed softly on the nightstand. She hesitated, then reached for it. A message. "Lucas Bennett. Still awake?" Evelyn stared at the screen longer than necessary, then tied back. "Yeah." The reply came instantly. "You sounded off today. Everything okay?" She glanced at Nathan again. Still unmoving, still silent. Her fingers hovered over the screen. "Just tired," she wrote. 3 dots appeared. Then, "You don't have to pretend with me." Evelyn's followed. Something about that line, simple, direct, cut through the fog she'd been living in. No performance, no guessing, just clarity. She sat up slowly, pulling the blanket around her as she walked toward the living room. The city lights stretched endlessly beyond the glass, distant and indifferent. Her phone buzzed again. "Call me?" Evelyn hesitated for only a second, then pressed a button. "Hey," Lucas's voice came through, warm, immediate. "Hey, you sound different tonight." She leaned her forehead against a window, eyes closing briefly. "Do I?" "Yeah," he said softly. "Like you're somewhere you don't want to be." Evelyn let out a quiet breath. "That obvious? To me?" "Yeah." She smiled faintly, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel invisible. She began, then stopped. "What?" Lucas asked. She opened her eyes, looking at her reflection in the glass. "I think something's already broken," she said. On the other end, Lucas didn't hesitate. Then maybe it's time to stop trying to fix it. Evelyn said nothing, but something inside her shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to change direction. Back in the bedroom, Nathan opened his eyes. He stared at the empty space beside him, listening to the faint murmur of Evelyn's voice from the other room. He didn't move, didn't interrupt, didn't react. Instead, he turned his head slightly toward the nightstand, where Evelyn's tablet lay, screen dark, but not entirely. A notification glowed faintly. A name. Lucas. Nathan watched it for a long moment, then closed his eyes again. Not in denial, not in ignorance, but in quiet understanding. Somewhere between the silence and the secrets, the plan had already begun. The first time Evelyn noticed Lucas Bennett, it wasn't because he said anything remarkable. It was because he listened. The office of Hawthorne and Reed Consulting sat on the 31st floor of a steel and glass building overlooking the Chicago Rivera place, where everything moved fast, sounded important, and felt slightly artificial. Conversations were sharp, smiles were strategic, and attention was a currency most people hoarded. Evelyn had mastered that world. She knew how to speak just enough, how to pause at the right moment, how to make people feel like they mattered without ever giving too much of herself away. It was a skill that had taken years to refine. Which was why Lucas stood out. He didn't interrupt. He didn't try to impress. He simply paid attention. It happened during a Monday strategy meeting, one of those long, draining sessions filled with numbers, projections, and carefully disguised competition. Evelyn was presenting a revised campaign proposal, her voice steady, her posture effortless. Halfway through, she noticed it. Most of the room had drifted. Phones checked discreetly, pens tapping, eyes glazing over. But Lucas, he was watching her. Not in the way men sometimes did, quick glances, shallow interest. This was different. Focused, intent. As if every word she said actually mattered. It threw her off, just slightly. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough for her to feel it. After the meeting, as people filtered out, Evelyn gathered her notes with practiced efficiency. "Hey," a voice said behind her. She turned. Lucas stood there, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened just enough to suggest effort without carelessness. Up close, he looked even more composed, confident in a way that didn't feel forced. "That last point you made," he said, "about shifting the narrative instead of chasing engagement. It was smart." Evelyn blinked once. "Thank you," she replied, polite, automatic. "I mean it," he added. Most people in that room were already thinking about lunch. A faint smile touched her lips. "That obvious? Only if you're paying attention." There it was again. That word. She studied him for a second longer than necessary. "You're new." 2 weeks, he said, still figuring out who actually runs things around here. "And?" she asked. Lucas tilted his head slightly. "Pretty sure it's you." Evelyn let out a quiet laugh, the sound surprising even herself. "That's a dangerous assumption. Is it wrong?" She didn't answer. Instead, she slid her tablet into her bag. "Be careful who you say that to. People don't like being second." Lucas smiled, unfazed. "Good thing I'm not most people." Something in that response lingered. Not arrogance, certainty. "See you around, Lucas," she said, turning away. "Looking forward to it, Evelyn." It should have ended there. A brief exchange, a passing impression, the kind of moment that dissolves into routine. But it didn't. Because the next day, he remembered her coffee order. She hadn't told him, hadn't mentioned it. But when she walked into the break room that morning, there it was, placed neatly on the counter beside her usual spot. Black coffee, no sugar. She frowned slightly, glancing around. Lucas leaned casually against the far counter. "You look like someone who doesn't waste time with extras." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "That's either observant or presumptuous. Maybe both." She picked up the cup, considering him. "And if you were wrong? Then I'd owe you a better one tomorrow." A pause. Then, slowly, she took a sip. It was exactly how she liked it. Evelyn didn't comment, but she didn't walk away either. It became a pattern after that. Small things at first, a comment after meetings, a shared glance when someone said something particularly pointless. Conversations that started casually, but lasted longer than expected. Lucas had a way of asking questions that didn't feel invasive, but somehow led deeper than surface-level answers. "What made you choose this field? Do you actually enjoy it, or are you just good at it? When was the last time something surprised you?" Evelyn found herself answering, not because she had to, because she wanted to. And that was new. At home, nothing changed, which, in its own way, was the problem. Nathan still worked late, still spoke in measured, careful sentences, still looked at her like he was searching for something he couldn't quite name. One night, as they sat across from each other at dinner, Evelyn realized something unsettling. She didn't feel anything. Not anger, not sadness, just absence. "You've been quiet," Nathan said, setting his fork down. She glanced up. "Have I?" "More than usual." Evelyn shrugged lightly. "Work's busy." Nathan nodded, accepting it too easily. He always did. And for the first time, she wondered if that was indifference or restraint. Her phone buzzed softly against the table. She didn't check it, but she knew who it was. Later, in the bathroom, she unlocked the screen. "Lucas, survived today?" A small smile formed before she could stop it. "Barely." The reply came almost instantly. "Tomorrow's worse." She hesitated, then typed, looking forward to it. The shift didn't happen all at once. It wasn't a decision. It was a series of moments, small, almost insignificant on their own, that began to add up. The way Lucas noticed when she was tired, the way he remembered things she mentioned in passing, the way he looked at her like she wasn't just present, but important. It filled something, something she hadn't realized was empty. One evening they stayed late at the office. Not intentionally, it just happened. Most of the floor had cleared out, leaving behind the low hum of fluorescent lights and the distant glow of the city outside. Evelyn leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. "If I look at one more report, I might actually lose my mind." Lucas glanced over from his desk. "That would definitely hurt your reputation." She smirked faintly. "I have a reputation?" "Oh, absolutely. And what is it?" He studied her for a moment. "Controlled," he said. "Precise. Like you don't let anything touch you unless you choose it." Evelyn held his gaze. "And you think that's true?" "I think," Lucas said slowly, "it used to be." The words landed deeper than she expected. She looked away first. "That's a bold assumption. Is it wrong?" Evelyn exhaled quietly, turning her chair toward the window. The city stretched endlessly below, lights flickering like distant signals. "I don't know anymore," she admitted. The honesty surprised her. Lucas didn't respond right away. When he did, his voice was softer. "You don't have to have everything figured out." She let out a quiet laugh. "That's not really how my life works. Maybe that's the problem." Silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, just real. Evelyn felt it again, that shift. Subtle, dangerous. "Why do you care?" she asked suddenly. Lucas didn't hesitate. "Because I see you." The simplicity of it made her chest tighten. No explanation, no conditions, just that. Evelyn swallowed, her pulse quickening slightly. "This isn't a good idea," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. Lucas stood, walking slowly toward her desk, but stopping just far enough to leave space between them. "I didn't say anything was happening." "You didn't have to." A beat. Then quietly. "Neither did you." Their eyes met, and for a moment, everything else disappeared. Later that night, Evelyn stood in the elevator, watching the numbers descend. Her reflection stared back at her, composed, familiar. But something beneath it had shifted. Something she couldn't quite name. Or maybe didn't want to. Her phone buzzed. "Lucas, get home safe." She stared at the message longer than necessary. Then typed, "You too." A pause. Then, before she could stop herself, "Thank you, for tonight." The reply came slower this time. "Anytime." Evelyn leaned her head back against the elevator wall, closing her eyes briefly. A thought formed, quiet but persistent. "I deserve this." Not the affair, not yet. Just this feeling. Being seen. Being wanted. Being understood. By the time the elevator doors opened, the justification had already taken root. At home, Nathan was awake, sitting in the living room, waiting. "You're late," he said calmly. Evelyn stepped inside, slipping off her heels. "Work." Nathan nodded. "Of course, always work." He studied her for a moment, his gaze lingering just a second too long. "You seem different," he said. Evelyn's heart skipped just slightly. "Different how?" Nathan didn't answer immediately. Then, "Like you've already left." The words hung in the air, sharp, unsettling. Evelyn forced a small smile. "You're imagining things." Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. Nathan looked at her a moment longer, then nodded. Maybe, but something in his eyes suggested otherwise. That night, Evelyn lay awake again, but this time she wasn't staring at the ceiling. She was staring at her phone, at a name that now meant more than it should. And somewhere, beneath the quiet justifications and carefully constructed logic, a line had already been crossed. Not physically, not yet, but something deeper, something harder to undo. In the darkness, Nathan opened his eyes once more. He didn't look at her, didn't speak, but he listened, to the silence, to the distance, to everything she thought he couldn't feel. And slowly, quietly, he began to understand exactly where this was going. The idea didn't arrive all at once. It formed slowly, like condensation on glass, subtle, almost invisible at first, until it became something she couldn't ignore. Evelyn didn't think of herself as careless. If anything, she prided herself on the opposite. She didn't make impulsive decisions. She didn't let emotions dictate outcomes. And she certainly didn't destroy things without understanding the consequences. Which was why she didn't leave Nathan, not immediately. Because leaving was messy. It raised questions. It invited judgment. And Evelyn Harper had spent years building a life that looked flawless. She wasn't going to let it fall apart in a way she couldn't control. The realization came one evening as she scrolled through her social media feed. A former colleague had posted about her divorce. The comments were predictable. Stay strong. You deserve better. We always knew he wasn't right for you. Evelyn paused. That last one lingered. We always knew. Not she chose to live. Not things didn't work out. But a narrative, crafted, shaped, reinforced by perception. Carefully guided. She set her phone down slowly. That was when it clicked. It wasn't just about leaving. It was about how the story was told. Nathan would never defend himself. That was the first piece. He wasn't confrontational. He didn't explain himself unless asked. And even then, he chose his words carefully, often too carefully to be understood. Which meant, if a story was built around him, he wouldn't tear it down. Evelyn leaned back against the couch, her mind moving faster now, connecting threads. All she had to do was tilt perception. Not lie. Never lie outright. Just highlight certain truths. Let people fill in the gaps themselves. That way, it wouldn't be her narrative. It would be everyone else's conclusion. And those were always the most convincing. The first step was subtle, almost harmless. At a small team dinner later that week, Evelyn arrived 10 minutes late. Not enough to draw attention, just enough to create a moment. Sorry, she said lightly, sliding into her seat beside a coworker. Nathan lost track of time again. It was said with a soft smile, almost affectionate, but the word again did the work for her. Lucas, sitting across from her, noticed. His eyes flickered briefly, just enough to register it. He didn't say anything, but he understood. It became easier after that. A comment here, a sigh there. Never dramatic. Never accusatory. Just consistent. Nathan's been buried in work lately. He forgets things sometimes. I think we're just in different places right now. Each sentence harmless on its own, but together they painted a picture. And people were always eager to complete a picture. At home, Evelyn adjusted too. Not dramatically, just enough to create contrast. She started asking Nathan about plans in front of others, knowing he'd hesitate, needing time to check his schedule. Are we still on for Saturday? She'd ask casually when friends were around. Nathan would pause. I might have a deadline. A small silence would follow. Evelyn would nod, smiling faintly. Of course. She never pushed, never argued. But the message lingered. He's not present. He's not trying. She is. It worked, faster than she expected. One afternoon, her friend Marissa leaned closer over coffee. You've been really patient with him, she said quietly. Evelyn blinked, feigning confusion. Patient? With Nathan? I mean, I've noticed. Evelyn looked down at her cup, tracing the rim with her finger. It's not that bad, she murmured. Melissa gave her a knowing look. You don't have to downplay it. There it was, not planted, not forced, arrived at naturally, exactly as Evelyn intended. She sighed softly, just enough to seem reluctant. I just don't think he sees me anymore, she said. Melissa reached across the table, squeezing her hand. You deserve better than that. Evelyn didn't respond, but inside, something settled into place. Lucas was different. He didn't ask questions right away. He watched, observed, waited. It wasn't until they were alone one evening, walking out of the office together, that he finally spoke. You're building something, he said. Evelyn glanced at him. What do you mean? Lucas shoved his hands into his coat pockets, his breath visible in the cold air. You don't say things randomly, he continued. You repeat patterns. You let people draw conclusions. Evelyn stopped walking. So? She asked, her tone neutral. Lucas turned to face her fully. So, I want to know if I'm part of the plan, or just watching it happen. The question hung between them, sharp, unavoidable. Evelyn studied him carefully. You're perceptive, she said. I try to be. A pause. Then I'm not doing anything wrong, she said calmly. I'm just being honest about what's already there. Lucas held her gaze. That's not what I asked. Silence. Then Evelyn stepped closer, not enough to touch, but enough to shift the space between them. What do you want me to say? She asked softly. The truth. She smiled faintly. This is the truth. Lucas searched her face, as if trying to find the line between intention and justification. Be careful, Evelyn, he said quietly. There's a difference between telling the truth and shaping it. Her smile didn't fade. I know, And that was exactly the point. At home, Nathan noticed everything. Not the words, the patterns, the timing. The way Evelyn spoke differently when others were around. The way she looked at him, not with anger, but with something more calculated. He didn't confront her, didn't ask questions. Instead, he began to pay attention in his own way, quietly, systematically. One night, he opened his laptop and scrolled through their shared calendar. Cancelled plans, rescheduled dinners, events he hadn't realized carried weight. He opened old messages, read conversations he barely remembered, not searching for proof, just context, understanding. In the bedroom, Evelyn lay on her side, texting. The light from her phone flickered softly against the wall. Nathan didn't turn toward her, but he didn't need to. He already knew. Lucas, you're quiet tonight. Evelyn, just thinking. Lucas, about him? A pause. Then Evelyn, about everything. 3 dots. Then Lucas, and where do I fit into that? Evelyn hesitated. For a moment, just a moment, something like doubt surfaced. But it passed quickly, replaced by clarity, control. Evelyn, you're the part that makes sense. She locked her phone, exhaling slowly. The plan wasn't complete, not yet, but it was working. People were noticing, the narrative was forming. And Nathan wasn't stopping it, which meant one of 2 things. He didn't see it, or he didn't think it mattered. Evelyn closed her eyes. Either way, she was in control. Across the room, Nathan sat in the dim light of his office. A single document open on his screen. Untitled, blank. For a long time, he didn't type anything. Then, slowly, deliberately, he began to write. Not a message, not an accusation. Just a record. Dates, moments, details. Not to expose her, not to confront her, but to understand something deeper. Because Nathan wasn't confused, he wasn't blind, and he wasn't passive. He was waiting for the moment when the story Evelyn was building would finally reveal what she thought she had hidden. And somewhere between intention and execution, between truth and manipulation, one small detail remained, unnoticed, unaccounted for, the kind of detail that changes everything. At first, Evelyn thought it was working perfectly, too perfectly. That should have been the warning, but it wasn't. Nathan stopped asking questions, not gradually, not reluctantly, just completely. No more "what time will you be home?" No more glances at the clock when she walked in late. No quiet attempts to start conversations that went nowhere. It was as if he had stepped back from the marriage not in anger, not in pain, but in something far more unsettling, acceptance. "You're quiet tonight," Evelyn said one evening, setting her back down by the door. Nathan looked up from the couch, where a book rested loosely in his hands. "Long day?" She paused. That wasn't an answer. "It was fine," she said, watching him carefully. "You didn't answer my question." Nathan closed the book, placing it gently on the table beside him. "I don't think it matters," he replied. The words were calm, measured, too measured. Evelyn frowned slightly. "Since when?" A small pause, then, "Since I realize you don't actually want an answer." The air shifted, subtle but unmistakable. Evelyn forced a light laugh. "That's not fair, isn't it?" His gaze held hers, not confrontational, not accusing, just steady. And for a brief second, something unfamiliar flickered beneath her confidence. Not guilt, something closer to unease. "You've been distant," she said, redirecting. "I'm trying to talk to you, Nathan." "And I'm listening. That's not the same thing." "No," he agreed quietly. "It isn't." Silence followed. But this silence was different from before. Before, it had been empty. Now it felt intentional. Evelyn turned away first. That too was becoming a pattern. At work, things were easier, clearer. Lucas was still there, present, attentive, predictable in a way that felt grounding. "You look tired," he said one afternoon, leaning against her desk. Evelyn glanced up from her screen. "Do I?" "Yeah," he said, "like something's not going the way you expected." She stiffened slightly. "Everything's fine." Lucas studied her. "Is it?" Evelyn leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "You're starting to sound like you don't trust me." "That's not it," he said calmly. "I just don't think you're as in control as you think you are." The words landed sharper than intended. Evelyn's expression cooled. "I know exactly what I'm doing." Lucas didn't argue, but he didn't agree either, and somehow that bothered her more. The shift at home became harder to ignore. Nathan was still there, physically, but something about him had withdrawn. Not in the way she expected. Not cold, not distant. Just removed. Like he was no longer reacting to her, but observing something else entirely. One night, she came home past midnight, later than usual, later than necessary. A test maybe, or a statement. She wasn't sure anymore. The apartment was quiet. Lights dimmed. Nathan sat at the dining table, a glass of water untouched in front of him, waiting. Evelyn felt a flicker of something, anticipation perhaps. Finally, a reaction. "You're up," she said, slipping off her coat. Nathan nodded. Couldn't sleep. She walked past him, setting her bag down deliberately. "You didn't call," she added. "I didn't think you'd answer." The honesty caught her off guard. "I would have," she said. Nathan tilted his head slightly. "Would you?" A pause. Evelyn's jaw tightened. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," he said simply. "Nothing. Always nothing." Evelyn turned to face him fully now. "You don't get to act like this," she said, her voice sharpening. "If you have something to say, just say it." Nathan met her gaze. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, quietly, "I don't think it would change anything." The words were soft, but they hit harder than anger ever could. Evelyn felt it then, that crack. Small, but real. "You're just giving up?" she asked. Nathan considered the question, then shook his head slightly. "No," he said. "I think I just stopped trying to control something that doesn't belong to me anymore." The room felt colder. Evelyn laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That's convenient." "Is it?" "Yes," she snapped. "You get to act like you're above it all while doing nothing to fix it." Nathan didn't react to the accusation. Instead, he stood, picking up his glass. "I don't think this is something I can fix alone," he said. "And I'm trying?" Evelyn shot back. Nathan looked at her then. Really looked. And for a brief moment, something flickered in his expression. Not anger, not sadness. Something closer to understanding. "You're doing something," he said. The words were neutral, but the meaning wasn't. Evelyn's breath caught slightly. "What's that supposed to mean?" Nathan held her gaze. Then he looked away. "Good night, Evelyn." And just like that, the moment ended. She stood there long after he left the room, heart beating faster than it should. Not because of what he said, but because of what he didn't. The next morning, Evelyn sat across from Melissa again, coffee untouched. "You okay?" Melissa asked. Evelyn hesitated, then shook her head lightly. "He's not even trying anymore." Melissa frowned. "Nathan?" Evelyn nodded, looking down. "It's like he's already checked out." Melissa reached across the table. "That's not your fault." Evelyn didn't respond, because for the first time, she wasn't entirely sure that was true. Later that day, Lucas found her in the conference room, staring out at the city. "You're thinking again," he said. Evelyn didn't turn. "He's not reacting." Lucas leaned against the doorframe. "Isn't that what you wanted?" "Yes," she said quickly. Too quickly. Lucas watched her carefully. "But," he prompted. Evelyn exhaled slowly. "But it doesn't feel right." There it was, finally. Lucas stepped closer. "Because it's not real." Evelyn shook her head. "No, it is real. That's the problem." She turned to face him now, her composure slipping just slightly. "I thought he'd fight," she admitted. "Or argue. Or something. And instead, he just..." She struggled for the word. "Accepted it?" Lucas offered. Evelyn nodded. Lucas was quiet for a moment. Then, "Maybe that's his way of fighting." The idea hit her harder than expected. "No," she said immediately. "That doesn't make sense." "Doesn't it?" Lucas replied. "You're trying to control the outcome. Maybe he's controlling how he responds to it." Evelyn stared at him. Something about that unsettled her, deeply. That night, she watched Nathan more closely. The way he moved through the apartment, the way he spoke, careful, measured, deliberate, the way he didn't look at her unless necessary. It wasn't avoidance, it wasn't pain, it was something else, something she couldn't quite define. And that was the problem. Evelyn understood anger, she understood conflict, she understood emotional reactions. But this calm, this quiet distance, it gave her nothing to work with, nothing to shape, nothing to control. Later, as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, a thought surfaced uninvited. What if he knows? Her chest tightened. No, that didn't make sense. If he knew, he would say something. He would react. He would, wouldn't he? Evelyn turned onto her side, looking at Nathan's back. Still, silent, unreadable. Across the room, in the faint glow of his office light, Nathan sat once more in front of his laptop. The document was no longer blank. It was filled. Dates, observations, patterns. But tonight he added something new. A single line. Simple, precise. "She thinks I've stopped paying attention." Nathan leaned back in his chair, eyes lingering on the words. Then, slowly he closed the laptop. Back in bed, Evelyn closed her eyes, trying to convince herself of something she had believed so easily before. That everything was under control. That the plan was working. That Nathan's silence meant defeat. But somewhere beneath that certainty, a quiet, persistent doubt began to form. Not loud enough to stop her, not yet, but enough to change the way the silence felt. Because silence, she was beginning to realize, was not always empty. Sometimes it was where the truth waited. Nathan didn't start writing because he was angry. He started because he needed clarity. The document had no title, no structure, just dates, moments. Fragments of a life that, on the surface, still looked intact, but underneath had already begun to fracture. He never intended for anyone to read it, especially not Evelyn, because this wasn't evidence, it wasn't a weapon, it was understanding. October 3rd. She laughed at something on her phone tonight. Not the kind of laugh she gives out of politeness, something real. I don't remember the last time I heard that from her, with me. Nathan stared at the line for a long time after writing it, then continued. October 7th. She asked about Saturday plans in front of Melissa. She already knew I had a deadline. The timing wasn't accidental. He paused, not because he was unsure, because he was certain. Nathan had always noticed details. It was part of how he worked. Architecture demanded it. The smallest miscalculation could compromise the entire structure. Patterns mattered. Timing mattered. And Evelyn had started repeating patterns. He just hadn't said anything. The first time he saw Lucas's name, it meant nothing. A notification, a message, a moment that passed too quickly to matter. But then it happened again. And again. Not constant, not obvious, careful, almost intentional in its restraint. Nathan didn't check her phone, didn't search for proof. That wasn't who he was. But he didn't need to, because what he was seeing wasn't in the messages. It was in her. The way she became more present when she was somewhere else. The way her attention sharpened, but not toward him. The way she began to speak about their marriage as if it had already ended. Not directly, but subtly, consistently. He recognized the structure of it. Not emotionally, logically. A narrative being built, layer by layer. Nathan opened another file, an email draft, unsent. To Evelyn I know. He stared at the two words. Simple, complete, useless. He didn't send it, because knowing wasn't the same as understanding, and understanding required patience. Nathan closed the draft, opened another. To Dr. Helen Morris. I'm not sure if this qualifies as something worth discussing, but I think I've been observing the slow end of my marriage in real time. Not through conflict, but through absence. I don't know if that's better or worse. He hesitated, then added, I also think she believes I don't see it. He didn't send that one either. Instead, he saved it, like everything else. Nathan wasn't avoiding the truth, he was mapping it. One night, weeks earlier, he had woken up to the faint glow of Evelyn's phone. She wasn't beside him. Her voice drifted softly from the living room, not loud enough to hear words, but enough to hear tone. Warm, open, alive in a way he hadn't heard in a long time. He had sat there in the dark, listening, not to spy, not to confirm, just to feel it. The distance, the shift, the undeniable reality that something had moved beyond his reach. And in that moment, something inside him had changed. Not broken, not collapsed, just adjusted. Back in the present, Nathan scrolled further down his document. October 12th. She's more careful with her words now. Not less honest, just more selective. It's not deception, it's curation. October 15th. I think she wants me to notice, but not confront. There's a difference. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes briefly. The strange part wasn't a betrayal. It wasn't even the possibility of losing her. It was the precision, the intention behind it. Evelyn wasn't acting impulsively. She was designing an outcome. And Nathan had spent his entire life understanding how things were built, which meant he also understood how they collapsed. In the kitchen, Evelyn's voice echoed faintly as she spoke on the phone. Soft, measured, careful. Nathan didn't move, didn't listen closely. He didn't need to, because by now he could predict the rhythm. Later that night, she entered the bedroom quietly, slipped into bed as if nothing had shifted, as if everything was still the same. Nathan kept his breathing steady, pretending to sleep. Not because he wanted to avoid her, but because he wanted to observe what she did when she thought no one was watching. Evelyn lay still for a moment, then reached for her phone. The screen lit up briefly. Nathan caught the reflection in the mirror across the room. A name. Lucas. A pause, then typing. Nathan closed his eyes again, not in denial, but in confirmation. The next day, he did something different. He left work early, came home before Evelyn, sat in the quiet apartment and looked around. Really looked. The framed photos, the carefully arranged furniture, the subtle signs of a life that had been maintained, not lived. He walked into the bedroom, opened the closet. Her side was fuller than his, organized, intentional, nothing out of place. Nathan ran his fingers lightly along the edge of a shelf, then stopped. There, tucked behind a row of neatly folded scarves, was something slightly out of alignment. Not obvious, but noticeable. He didn't touch it, didn't move it, just registered it. Another detail, another piece. Nathan stepped back, closing the closet gently. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture did. Understanding was no longer abstract, it was complete. That night, he opened his document again, scrolled to the bottom, and wrote October 18th. It's not the betrayal that defines this, it's the belief that I wouldn't see it. He paused, then added one more line. That might be the only mistake she's made. Nathan stared at the words for a long time. Then slowly, he saved the document, closed the laptop, and turned off the light. In the darkness, the apartment felt unchanged, quiet, still, perfectly intact. But beneath that surface, everything had already shifted. In bed, Evelyn lay awake again, but this time the silence pressed in differently. He hadn't asked where she'd been, hadn't questioned her, hadn't reacted. And for the first time, it didn't feel like indifference. It felt like distance. The kind that didn't come from not knowing, but from knowing too much. Evelyn turned her head slightly, looking at Nathan's silhouette in the dark. Still, calm, unreachable. A thought surfaced again, stronger now, clearer. What if he's not losing me? Her breath caught. What if he's already let go? Across from her, Nathan opened his eyes. Not moving, not speaking, just aware. Because he wasn't waiting for the truth anymore. He already had it. Now he was waiting for something else. The moment Evelyn would realize, the story she had been so carefully writing was no longer hers to control. Evelyn chose a Thursday. She wasn't sure why. Maybe because Thursdays felt neutral. Neither the weight of beginnings nor the exhaustion of endings. Just a quiet midpoint where decisions could slip in without drawing too much attention. Or maybe because she needed it to feel controlled, planned, contained. She came home earlier than usual. Not late, not rushed, just deliberate. Nathan was already there. Of course he was. Sitting at the dining table, a glass of water beside him, his laptop closed but still within reach, as if he had just finished something important or was about to begin. He looked up when she entered. No surprise, no tension, just acknowledgement. "You're home early," he said. Evelyn slipped off her coat slowly, buying herself a few extra seconds. "So are you?" Nathan nodded faintly. "I've been trying to be." The words were simple, but something about them felt final. Evelyn walked into the kitchen, setting her bag down with careful precision. Her movements were measured, rehearsed in a way she hadn't consciously planned, but had imagined many times. This was it, the moment everything would shift, the moment her plan would reach its natural conclusion. She turned to face him. "We need to talk." Nathan didn't hesitate. "Okay." No tension, no hesitation, just acceptance. It unsettled her immediately. Evelyn took a breath, steadying herself. "I don't think this is working anymore," she said. There it was. Clean, direct, exactly how she intended. Nathan watched her quietly. "How long have you felt that way?" he asked. The question was calm. Too calm. Evelyn had expected defensiveness, confusion, maybe even anger. Not this. "I don't know," she said, choosing her words carefully. "A while." Nathan nodded slightly, as if confirming something he already suspected. "That makes sense." Evelyn blinked. "That's it?" she asked, unable to hide the edge in her voice. "You're just going to agree?" Nathan leaned back slightly in his chair, studying her. "What would you prefer?" he asked. The question landed strangely. "I'm not asking for anything," she said quickly. "I'm just being honest. And I'm listening." That word again. Listening. Not reacting. Not fighting. Just present. And somehow that felt worse. Evelyn crossed her arms, her composure beginning to slip at the edges. "I thought you'd have more to say." Nathan considered that. "I probably do," he admitted. "I just don't think saying it would change anything." There it was again, that quiet certainty. Evelyn felt a flicker of frustration rise. "You don't even want to try?" she pressed. Nathan's gaze didn't waver. "I think we've both been trying," he said, "just not in the same direction." The words were soft, but precise. Too precise. Evelyn looked away for a moment, regrouping. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He was supposed to resist, to question, to make it harder, so that when she walked away it would feel justified, clear, undeniable. But this felt like something else entirely. "I've been unhappy," she said, her voice quieter now. Nathan nodded. "I know." Her head snapped back toward him. "You know?" He held her gaze. Yes. The simplicity of it sent a ripple through her. How? She asked. Nathan didn't answer right away. Then, you're not as hard to read as you think. Evelyn's chest tightened. That's not fair. I'm not trying to be fair, he said gently. I'm just trying to be honest. Honest, the word echoed, but something about it felt different now. Evelyn stepped closer to the table, her pulse quickening. There's someone else, she said. The verse hung in the air, heavy, final. This was it, the moment everything should break. Nathan didn't flinch, didn't look surprised, didn't even look hurt. He just nodded. I figured. The word tilted, just slightly. You figured? Yes. Evelyn stared at him, searching his face for something, anything that resembled shock, anger, pain. There was nothing. Only that same quiet understanding. How long? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan exhaled slowly. Long enough. The answer wasn't specific, but it didn't need to be. Evelyn took a step back, her thoughts scrambling. This wasn't possible. She had been careful, precise, controlled. You didn't say anything, she said, almost accusing. Nathan's expression softened slightly. I didn't think you wanted me to. The words hit deeper than she expected. What does that even mean? Nathan stood now, closing the distance between them, but not invading it. I think, he said carefully, you were already telling a story. I didn't want to interrupt it. Evelyn felt her breath catch. A story. That's exactly what it had been. But hearing him say it made it feel exposed. Real in a way she hadn't anticipated. You should be angry, she said suddenly. Nathan tilted his head slightly. Would that help? Yes, she snapped. It would make this normal. Nathan considered that. Then shook his head. I don't think there's anything normal about this. The calm in his voice was unbearable now. Then react, she said, her voice rising. Say something, do something. Nathan looked at her, really looked. And for the first time there was something there. Not anger, not pain, something quieter, heavier. I am, he said softly. Evelyn froze. What? I'm letting you go. The words landed like silence. Total, absolute. Evelyn felt it then, that crack widening, spreading, becoming something she couldn't ignore. You're just giving up? She asked again, but this time the question sounded different, less certain. Nathan shook his head slowly. No, he said. I think I just stopped holding on to something that already left. The room felt too small, too still. Evelyn's mind raced, searching for something to hold on to, some version of control she could reclaim. This is what you want? She asked. Nathan didn't hesitate. No, he said, but it's what is. The distinction was subtle, but devastating. A long silence followed. Neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. Finally, Evelyn looked away. I'll start making arrangements, she said, her voice distant now. Nathan nodded. Okay, no argument, no resistance, just agreement. She turned, walking toward the bedroom, her steps slower than before, less certain. Behind her, Nathan remained where he was, still, calm, unshaken. Inside the bedroom, Evelyn closed the door softly, then leaned back against it, her breath uneven. This wasn't how it was supposed to feel. She had planned this, controlled every detail, every perception, every outcome. So why did it feel like she had just lost something she didn't realize she was still holding on to? In the living room, Nathan picked up his glass of water, took a slow sip, then set it back down. His hands were steady, his expression unchanged. But when he turned toward the window, something in his eyes shifted. Not regret, not doubt, just finality. Later that night, Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed, her phone in her hand. Lucas's name stirred back at her. She should have felt relief, freedom, excitement. Instead, there was only silence. She typed, "It's done." The reply came quickly. "Are you okay?" Evelyn stared at the screen. The question felt distant, unfamiliar. "Yeah," she typed, then hesitated, before adding, "I think so." Across the apartment, Nathan opened his laptop one last time. The document still sat there, complete, full. He scrolled to the bottom, read the final line again. Then, slowly, he added one more. "She told me tonight. It changed nothing." Nathan closed the laptop, turned off the light, and for the first time in a long while, he slept. In the bedroom, Evelyn lay awake, staring into the dark, listening to the silence she had worked so hard to create. But now it didn't feel like control. It felt like something else entirely, like standing at the edge of something irreversible, and realizing too late that no one was trying to stop her from falling.